YouTube storytelling video. Outline: a hidden sharpshooter in the rocks turned the tide when soldiers were about to die. Hook: first 10 seconds, expanded opening. Statement: my sister Celeste had been missing for 3 days when I watched her save 12 soldiers from certain death with a single bullet. Fired from a cliff nobody knew she could climb. Detailed opening narrative, 3 days. That's how long my little sister had been missing in the mountains of Afghanistan before she became a ghost story that would haunt the Taliban for years to come. I'm Dylan Hartwell, and I need to tell you about the day my 19-year-old sister turned into something between an angel and a nightmare, depending on which end of her rifle you were looking down. When people ask me about combat, they expect stories about brotherhood, honor, and sacrifice. They don't expect me to tell them about a girl who grew up climbing trees in Virginia and ended up picking off enemy fighters from positions that defied physics. But that's exactly what happened on October 15, 2019, in a canyon that doesn't appear on any tourist maps. See, Celeste wasn't supposed to be the hero of this story. She was supposed to be my baby sister, the one I worried about every single day since we both enlisted. The one who used to beat me at every shooting competition back home, much to our grandfather's delight. The one who could free climb rock faces that made experienced mountaineers nervous. The one I spent 8 months trying to protect, never realizing she was preparing to save my life. Character foundations. I'm a combat medic with the 82nd Airborne. 22 years old, and before this story ends, you'll understand why I sleep better at night knowing Celeste has my back. My sister enlisted 6 months after I did, against every argument I could make. She wanted to be a reconnaissance specialist, which meant long patrols in dangerous territory with minimal backup. Everything I begged her not to do. Celeste graduated high school as the state rifle champion 3 years running. While other girls were at prom, she was teaching herself advanced ballistics and studying wind patterns. Our grandfather, a Marine sniper in Vietnam, saw something in her that even I didn't fully understand until that day in the canyon. He used to say she could read the mountains like sheet music. Captain Rodriguez led our unit like the father most of us never had. Tough, fair, and smart enough to keep us alive in situations that should have killed us. He knew both Hartwell's siblings and spent considerable effort keeping me focused on my job, instead of worrying about Celeste's. What none of us knew was that she had been preparing for this moment her entire life. The setup. Our grandfather taught us to hunt in the Blue Ridge Mountains every summer until we enlisted. While I learned field medicine and how to keep people breathing, Celeste mastered the art of becoming invisible. She could climb rock faces that would challenge professional mountaineers, find shooting positions that seemed impossible, and wait for hours without moving. Skills I thought were just impressive hobbies until they became the difference between life and death for 12 American soldiers. The irony wasn't lost on me that I spent months trying to protect someone who was better equipped for survival than anyone in our unit. But that's not a lesson you learn until you're pinned down in a canyon, watching enemy muzzle flashes close in from 3 sides, and suddenly hearing the distinctive crack of an American sniper rifle from a direction. That should have been empty sky. This is the story of how my little sister disappeared into the Afghan mountains for 3 days and emerged as something the enemy would whisper about in their final moments. It's about family, fear, and the moment you realize the person you've been trying to protect has been protecting you all along. Forward Operating Base Vanguard sits carved into a mountainside like a concrete scar, against the ancient rock of the Hindu Kush. October in Afghanistan brings thin air that burns your lungs and temperatures that drop 30 degrees after sunset. I'd been stationed here for 8 months, long enough to know every crack in the perimeter walls and the exact sound incoming mortars make when they're too close for comfort. 8 months of patching up soldiers, of learning that combat medicine is less about textbook procedures and more about making impossible decisions in seconds. 8 months of missing home while simultaneously knowing I was exactly where I needed to be. Then Celeste arrived. 6 weeks earlier, I was checking supplies in the medical bay when I heard a voice that shouldn't have existed 10,000 miles from Virginia. "Permission to enter, Corpsman Hartwell?" I turned around and there she was, dusty from transport, rifle slung across her back, grinning like she'd just pulled off the world's greatest prank. My baby sister had followed me to war. The reunion wasn't what either of us expected. She was different, harder somehow, with the confident bearing of someone who'd earned her place among soldiers. I was different too, worn down by months of seeing too much and sleeping too little. Where we used to joke and compete, now we circled each other like wary strangers wearing familiar faces. "You shouldn't be here, Celeste," I told her that first night over lukewarm coffee in the mess hall. "Neither should you, but here we are," she replied, meeting my eyes with a steadiness that reminded me uncomfortably of our grandfather. She'd been assigned to Reconnaissance Team Bravo, which meant long-range patrols into territory where backup might be hours or days away. Exactly the kind of mission that kept me awake at night. Captain Rodriguez tried to reassure me, pulling me aside after morning briefings to remind me that Celeste had scored higher in mountain warfare training than anyone in her class. "She's not your responsibility anymore, Hartwell," he said. "She's a soldier, but she was still my sister. Still the girl who used to climb the tallest oak tree in our backyard just to prove she could. Still the teenager who disappeared into the Blue Ridge Mountains for entire weekends, coming back with stories about hidden caves and impossible views. Now those same instincts were taking her into Afghan valleys where American soldiers vanished without radio calls or distress signals. Our last conversation haunts me. 3 days before everything changed, her team was prepping for a routine reconnaissance mission in the Kandahar Pass, the same route our supply convoys used twice weekly. Standard patrol, minimal risk, back by sunset. I found her cleaning her rifle in the armory, focused and methodical like our grandfather had taught us. "This isn't a game, Celeste," I said, watching her check the scope alignment for the 3rd time. "These mountains eat people alive." She looked up at me with those same green eyes that used to challenge me to climbing contests. "You don't belong out here, Celeste. You should have stayed home." The words came out harsher than I intended, born from 8 months of fear and frustration and watching too many body bags leave on transport helicopters. She stood slowly, slinging the rifle across her shoulder. "I can take care of myself better than you think, big brother." That was the last thing she said to me. 12 hours later, her patrol missed their evening check-in. 18 hours later, a search helicopter found their vehicles abandoned in a narrow canyon. No signs of struggle, no blood, no bodies. Just empty trucks and silence. For 3 days, I carried the weight of those words while search and rescue teams found nothing but wind and rocks. 3 days of wondering if my need to protect her had driven away the only family I had left in this place. 3 days before I learned that sometimes the people you're trying to protect are busy preparing to save your life. Captain Rodriguez assigned my unit to secure the same supply route where Celeste had vanished. "We move out at 600, he announced. "Stay sharp. Intel suggests heavy Taliban presence in the area." I packed my medical kit and tried not to think about empty trucks and unanswered radio calls. At 06:30 hours, our convoy rolled out of Phoebe Vanguard with 12 soldiers, 3 Humvees, and enough supplies to keep another forward base operational for 2 weeks. Standard escort mission through the Kandahar Pass, the same route Celeste's team had traveled 3 days earlier. The same route where they disappeared. Captain Rodriguez rode in the lead vehicle, scanning the ridge lines through binoculars while maintaining radio contact with base. I sat in the medical truck, checking and rechecking my trauma kit, trying to focus on anything except the growing knot in my stomach. The mountains here rose like ancient sentinels on both sides of the narrow pass, creating perfect natural corridors for ambushes. Sergeant Mills, our squad's demolitions expert, was cracking jokes to lighten the mood. "Hartwell, you look like someone stole your lunch money. Relax, man. These supply runs are milk runs compared to the crazy stuff your sister probably gets into." I wanted to tell him that my sister was missing, possibly dead, in these same mountains. Instead, I adjusted the straps on my medical pack and tried to look professional. The canyon narrowed as we climbed higher into the pass. Sheer rock walls rose hundreds of feet on both sides, creating natural choke points where a few well-placed fighters could stop an entire convoy. The kind of terrain that made every soldier nervous. The kind of place where ambushes turned routine missions into body counts. At 07:47 hours, everything went to hell. The first RPG struck the lead Humvee's front quarter panel, sending a shower of metal fragments and smoke across the convoy. Before the echo faded, automatic weapons fire erupted from both sides of the canyon. Muzzle flashes sparked from concealed positions in the rocks, creating deadly crossfire that turned our convoy into a kill zone. Contact front and flanks. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the radio. All vehicles, defensive positions. Now. I grabbed my rifle and medical bag, following Sergeant Mills as he dove behind a boulder the size of a pickup truck. Bullets sparked off the rocks around us, sending stone chips flying like deadly confetti. The sound was overwhelming, a constant crackling of gunfire mixed with shouted orders and the metallic ping of rounds striking vehicles. "Medic! We got wounded!" The call came from 3 different directions simultaneously. Private Jensen clutched his shoulder behind the rear Humvee. Corporal Davis was down beside the lead vehicle, crimson spreading across his leg. Sergeant Mills took a round through his chest plate that knocked him flat against our boulder. This is what combat medicine really means. Not the clean procedures from training, but choosing who to treat first when everyone needs help immediately. Mills was conscious but struggling to breathe, likely a pneumothorax from blunt trauma. Jensen was mobile but losing blood. Davis wasn't moving. I crawled to Mills first, pulling out a chest seal as bullets whined overhead. "Stay with me, Sergeant. You're going to be fine." The lie came easily because he needed to believe it. His breathing was shallow and rapid, classic signs of a collapsed lung. "How bad is it, Doc?" he whispered, eyes wide with the kind of fear that comes when you realize you might not see tomorrow. "You've had worse," I lied again, applying the seal and watching his color improve slightly. 45 minutes into the firefight, our situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Taliban fighters had us pinned down with nowhere to retreat. The narrow canyon walls that should have provided cover became a trap, preventing any flanking maneuvers or escape routes. Every time someone tried to move, coordinated fire from multiple positions forced them back down. Captain Rodriguez crawled over during a brief lull in the shooting. Radios jammed. "No backup coming. We're down to 30% ammunition." The math was simple and terrifying. 12 soldiers, 3 wounded, limited ammunition, and an unknown number of enemy fighters in superior positions. Even without formal military training, anyone could see how this ended. "How long can we hold?" I asked, applying pressure to Jensen's shoulder wound. "Maybe 20 minutes before they decide to rush our position," Rodriguez replied, scanning the ridgeline through his scope. "There's a sniper up there picking us off one by one. Professional work. Clean shots." I followed his gaze to a ridge position about 400 meters away. Occasionally, I could see a muzzle flash, followed seconds later by the crack of a high-powered rifle. Each shot found its mark with surgical precision. That's when the impossible happened. The enemy sniper who'd been terrorizing us for nearly an hour suddenly went silent. One moment he was systematically eliminating our defensive positions, the next moment, nothing. Just empty rocks and confused voices echoing in the canyon as Taliban fighters searched for their missing marksman. The silence from the ridge was more unsettling than the gunfire had been. For 47 minutes, that enemy sniper had been systematically hunting my squad with the precision of a metronome. Every 90 seconds, another shot. Every shot, another casualty or near miss that forced us deeper behind cover. Then nothing. "Where'd he go?" Private Jackson whispered, peering around the edge of his rock shelter. "Snipers don't just disappear," Captain Rodriguez muttered, scanning the ridgeline through his scope. "Either he's repositioning or someone took him out." The Taliban fighters seemed equally confused. Their coordinated assault had relied on that Overwatch sniper to keep our heads down while they maneuvered for the final push. Without him, their advance stalled as fighters looked around nervously, suddenly aware they might be in someone else's crosshairs. Then I heard it. A single rifle crack echoing from high above the canyon, coming from a direction that should have been impossible. The sound bounced off the rock walls, making it difficult to pinpoint. But the report was distinctly different from the enemy AK-47s. Sharper, more precise. "American! That's an M24! Sergeant Mills wheezed from where I'd propped him against our boulder. Despite his punctured lung, his ear for weapons remained sharp. "Sniper system. Long range. I knew that rifle. Every American soldier did. But more than that, I knew that particular sound from countless hunting trips in Virginia. Our grandfather's old Winchester had the same distinctive crack. and Celeste had been shooting variations of that platform since she was 12 years old. A second shot rang out 30 seconds later, this time from a completely different angle. Impossible. No sniper could reposition that quickly across terrain that would challenge experienced mountaineers. The Taliban fighters were looking up at the cliff faces now, pointing and shouting in Pashto, their voices carrying the edge of panic. "Captain," I called out, "request permission to observe the high ground." Rodriguez nodded, and I raised my binoculars toward the source of the shots. The cliff face rose nearly vertical for 800 feet, a wall of limestone and granite that only the most skilled climbers could navigate. There were no visible paths, no obvious positions where a sniper could establish effective overwatch. But I remembered something. Celeste, age 14, disappearing during a family camping trip, only to reappear hours later at the top of a cliff face our grandfather swore was unclimbable. She'd found handholds in rock that looked smooth from a distance, discovered ledges that existed only if you knew exactly where to look. She could get anywhere, Grandpa had said that day, equal parts proud and worried. That girl reads rock like it's talking to her. A third shot echoed from yet another impossible position, this one taking out a Taliban fighter who'd been advancing undercover along the canyon's western wall. The precision was surgical. 800 meters in mountain wind with a moving target, and whoever was up there made it look routine. Jesus Christ, Captain Rodriguez breathed. Whoever's up there is bouncing around those cliffs like Spider-Man. I studied the cliff face more carefully, searching for any sign of movement among the shadows and ledges. There, a glimpse of something that might have been fabric or equipment, visible for just a moment before disappearing into a crevice I couldn't have spotted without knowing exactly where to look. My heart started beating faster. 3 days ago, Celeste had vanished in these mountains. 3 days of search teams finding nothing but empty vehicles and questions. But what if she hadn't been captured? What if she'd done what she always did when hunting got difficult? What if she'd simply gone higher than anyone thought possible? A fourth shot confirmed my growing suspicion. The angle was wrong for any conventional sniper position, coming from a narrow ledge maybe 50 feet below the summit. The kind of position you could only reach if you'd spent your childhood free-climbing cliff faces and your teenage years studying ballistics with a Marine sniper grandfather. "Sir," I said to Captain Rodriguez, "I think we might have Guardian Angel support." Guardian Angel? Someone who knows these mountains better than the enemy does. Someone who's been watching this canyon for 3 days, learning every Taliban position, waiting for them to make their move. The enemy fire was becoming sporadic now, fighters reluctant to expose themselves to the mysterious sniper who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Their coordinated assault was crumbling into confused clusters of men looking over their shoulders at empty sky. Rodriguez keyed his radio. "All units, unknown friendly has engaged enemy positions from elevated overwatch. Prepare to advance on my signal." I checked my medical kit and prepared for whatever came next, but for the first time in 3 days, I felt something that might have been hope. The Taliban commander made his fatal mistake at 09:03 hours. After 20 minutes of watching his fighters get picked off by a ghost in the rocks, he decided to rally his remaining forces for one final assault. He emerged from behind a massive boulder 900 meters away, AK-47 raised above his head, shouting commands that echoed across the canyon. It was the kind of leadership moment that wins battles or ends careers. In this case, it ended his life. The shot came from the highest point of the western cliff face, a position that should have been unreachable by any human being. The bullet traveled nearly 1,000 meters through mountain wind, compensating for elevation, temperature, and the slight movement of a target who thought he was safely out of range. The commander dropped like a puppet with cut strings, and with him, the entire Taliban assault crumbled into chaos. "Impossible," Captain Rodriguez whispered, lowering his binoculars. "That's a 1,000-meter shot in mountain wind from a position nobody could reach. Nobody." But I was already moving. Medical bag in one hand, binoculars in the other, scanning the cliff face for confirmation of what my heart already knew. There, barely visible against the limestone, a figure in desert camouflage was rappelling down the rock face with fluid, confident movements that I'd recognize anywhere. "Contact R6, Private Jackson called out, raising his rifle toward the approaching figure. "Hold fire!" I shouted, my voice cracking with emotion I couldn't contain. Friendly. That's friendly! The figure detached from the rappelling line about 60 feet up and free climbed the remaining distance with the same casual confidence I remembered from childhood. Hands and feet finding holds in rock that looked smooth from a distance, moving with the grace of someone who'd been climbing before she could properly walk. Celeste dropped the final 8 feet to the canyon floor, landing in a combat crouch with her rifle immediately ready. Her uniform was torn in 3 places, her face streaked with camouflage paint and 3 days of mountain dust, but her eyes were clear and focused. She looked like she'd stepped out of a survival manual written by someone who actually knew how to survive. "Sorry I'm late." "Big brother," she said, moving toward our position with the measured pace of someone conserving energy after days of constant movement. "Had to take the scenic route." The words hit me like a physical blow. Relief, joy, disbelief, and pride crashed together in my chest until I could barely breathe. My little sister, who I'd spent 3 days mourning, had just saved 12 American lives with shooting that would make our grandfather weep with pride. "Where the hell have you been?" Captain Rodriguez demanded, though his tone carried more amazement than anger. Celeste slung her rifle across her back and accepted the water bottle I thrust toward her. "Tracking this Taliban cell since they ambushed my patrol 3 days ago. They've been planning this ambush for weeks, waiting for the right convoy. I couldn't radio for extraction without compromising my position, so I waited for them to make their move." She drank half the bottle before continuing. "Took me 2 days to map their positions and identify their command structure. Then I had to get into overwatch positions they couldn't anticipate or counter. Turns out if you're willing to climb high enough, most people never think to look up." Sergeant Mills, still breathing carefully around his chest injury, managed a laugh. "How did you make those shots from those positions?" "That last one was impossible." Celeste wiped dust from her rifle scope with practiced efficiency. "Grandpa taught us that the best hunters go where no one expects them. Taliban fighters know conventional sniper positions, patrol routes, standard military doctrine. They don't know someone crazy enough to free climb 800 feet of cliff face to get a shooting angle." "Those weren't just good shots," Rodriguez said. "That was professional-level precision shooting. 3 years of state rifle championships and a grandfather who made me practice wind compensation until I could do it in my sleep," Celeste replied. She looked at me directly for the first time since appearing. "Remember what you said about me not belonging here?" I thought about the words that had haunted me for 3 days. The protective instinct that had driven a wedge between us. The fear that had made me see weakness where there was actually strength I couldn't comprehend. "I was wrong," I said. "You belong wherever you choose to be." She smiled then, the same grin she'd worn after beating me in climbing contests as kids. "Good, because this squad just inherited the best Overwatch support in the Hindu Kush Mountains." Captain Rodriguez was already calling in our situation to base command. "Guardian Angel is alive and operational, requesting immediate extraction and commendation recommendations, but I was just staring at my sister, realizing that while I'd been trying to protect her, she'd been preparing to protect all of us. The Bronze Star with Valor arrived 6 weeks later, delivered by a colonel who flew in specifically to pin it on Celeste's uniform. The citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an armed enemy." But those words couldn't capture what really happened in that canyon. How do you document someone becoming a legend in the space of 4 rifle shots? The immediate aftermath was chaos managed by professionals. Medevac helicopters extracted our wounded while intelligence teams swept the area for enemy survivors and equipment. I spent the flight back to base treating Sergeant Mills and trying to process what I'd witnessed. My baby sister had spent 3 days alone in hostile territory, then single-handedly dismantled a Taliban ambush that should have killed us all. The debriefing lasted 4 hours. Celeste sat across from intelligence officers, methodically explaining her movements and observations with the precision of someone who'd spent 3 days cataloging every detail. She'd identified 17 enemy positions, mapped their communications patterns, and waited for the optimal moment to intervene. What looked like impossible shooting from multiple positions was actually calculated movement between predetermined locations she'd scouted over 2 days. "How did you survive 3 days without supplies?" Major Williams asked. Grandpa taught us that mountains provide everything you need if you know where to look, Celeste replied. Water sources, edible plants, shelter locations. The Taliban were looking for someone moving like a soldier. I moved like a hunter. Captain Rodriguez recommended her for promotion and transfer to special operations. This kind of tactical thinking and mountain warfare capability belongs at a higher level, he told the review board. But Celeste turned it down. She wanted to stay with our unit, providing overwatch support for supply convoys through the same dangerous terrain where she'd proven herself. The changes in our relationship happened gradually. Where I used to see a little sister who needed protection, I now saw a soldier whose skills complemented my own. During missions, she'd position herself in impossible locations while I managed ground-level medical support. We developed an unspoken communication system based on 20 years of shared experiences, from childhood hunting trips to combat operations. 3 months later, our unit was tasked with clearing a Taliban weapons cache from a valley that intelligence deemed extremely dangerous. While other soldiers worried about the mission parameters, I felt confident for the first time in my deployment. Somewhere in the rocks above us, Celeste would be watching, invisible to enemies but always visible to me through small signs I'd learned to recognize. A shifted stone, a shadow that moved slightly wrong, the feeling of being protected by someone who could see everything. "You sleep better now," Sergeant Mills observed one evening as we cleaned weapons in the armory. His chest had healed perfectly, though he still credited me with saving his life. He was right. The nightmares about losing Celeste had been replaced by something resembling peace, not because combat became safer, but because I finally understood that my sister didn't need my protection. She'd been preparing her entire life for exactly this kind of warfare, developing skills I could never match and didn't need to. Our grandfather visited us during leave 6 months later, traveling from Virginia to see his grandchildren serving together in the same unit. Over dinner at the base mess hall, he listened to our stories with the quiet pride of someone whose teaching had been proven in the most extreme circumstances possible. "I always knew Celeste would be something special," he said, "but I never imagined her talents would save lives halfway around the world." "She saved more than lives," I replied. "She saved my understanding of what family really means. The lesson took me almost a year to fully process. Protecting someone doesn't mean limiting their potential or shielding them from challenge. Sometimes it means stepping back and letting them become whoever they're meant to be, even if that person exceeds everything you thought possible." Celeste and I completed our deployment together, returning home with matching bronze stars and a shared understanding that some bonds grow stronger under pressure. She still calls me Big Brother, but now I call her Guardian Angel, not because it's her radio call sign, but because it's accurate. Back in Virginia, we visit our grandfather every month, sharing stories and maintaining the shooting skills that saved 12 American soldiers in an Afghan canyon. The mountains that taught us to hunt also taught us to protect each other in ways we never could have imagined. That's the real story of how my little sister became someone I look up to, and why I never doubt her when she says she's got my back. Because I've seen what happens when Celeste Hartwell decides to protect her family. The enemy never sees it coming.